Morning, everyone. My name is Mike Thompson. I'm a cybersecurity analyst at Argonne National Laboratory. My background, I entered the industry as an operations technician in Google's data center operations in the mid-2000s, and I've been doing a variety of IT consulting until coming to the lab, where my position is mostly focused on research and analysis. So what we're here to talk about today is assessing internet resilience at a key node. And in particular, what we're studying right now is Ashburn, Virginia as a key node. So this is going to be a fairly non-technical presentation. When talking about this stuff, working for the federal government now, I'm used to normally being sort of the most technical person in the room. And in this room, I might be the least technical person. So bear with me, but please, as you're listening, do think of questions or ways that you might be able to contribute, or even intuition-level reactions to what we're talking about. I'm going to try and devote as much of my time as I can to opening it up to Q&A, and I would really love to hear what you all have to say about this. And anyways, so a little background on the lab. Argonne National Laboratory is a federally funded research and development center. It's primarily run by the Department of Energy, but we also do a variety of national security work for the Department of Homeland Security. It has an illustrious history, starting out with the Manhattan Project. It's right outside of Chicago. Within Argonne's footprint, I work for a center called the Risk and Infrastructure Science Center, which is primarily focused on infrastructure assurance, evaluating the resilience and security of critical infrastructure targets around the country. Traditionally, the organization's footprint has been on physical security, but we've recently expanded out into computer security and cybersecurity, and primarily starting out trying to apply some of our expertise in physical security to the cyber realms, but also extending that into cutting-edge research. We do a variety of research on moving target defense, automotive hacking. Like everyone, we're doing big data research, all kinds of different things. So my capacity here is to talk about a study that we're doing in concert with the Department of Homeland Security, which is the study is part of what's called the Regional Resiliency Assessment Program. So these assessments, which we call them RRAPs for short, are done on a variety of critical infrastructures. Typically, in the past, they've always been done on physical infrastructure, things like power plants, dams, water treatment facilities, pipelines. This is the first one that we've ever done on a piece of internet infrastructure. So we wanted to look at a key piece of internet infrastructure, and due to Ashburn's sort of unique history, it stuck out as the place that was most well-suited to this sort of process. So in general, with these resiliency assessments, we look at downstream consequences to the lifeline sectors and the national economy. So in our case, if the Ashburn area data center cluster were to disappear from the face of the planet, what would happen to lifeline sectors such as energy, water, emergency services, transportation? Also, we would like to look at sort of a higher level, what would happen to the internet? We rely pretty heavily on TCP being a very resilient protocol. And, we all know that by and large, TCP has done a great job of routing around failures, even pretty major failures in the past. But the very rough numbers that we've been able to find about the amount of traffic going through the Ashburn region is somewhere upwards of 70% of the internet's traffic hits Ashburn at some point. So we'll go into this in a little bit more detail here in a minute. There's some contact information on the slides here for the lead at the Department of Homeland Security for this study. You're welcome to reach out to her if you have more interest, and my contact information is on here as well. The slides are downloadable on the NANOG page. So Ashburn, Virginia, as I'm guessing most of the people in this room know, historically was a very important internet connection point, but it's continued to be a real area of growth for data centers. And there's a lot of reasons behind this. The same reasons that it's typical to build data centers most places. that there's low-cost power and available water and land. But also Ashburn has some other unique features. They have a very active economic development staff in Loudoun County that's really tried to make favorable conditions for data centers and for that type of growth there. So it's still growing rapidly, even though Ashburn is probably one of the biggest areas of transit on the internet right now. It's slated to become the biggest area of data center concentration in the world in 2015. So it's still growing quite a bit. And of course, another reason that it's for its continued growth is its proximity to Washington, D.C. and the transatlantic fiber. So some of our objectives in doing this study, and again, we're reaching out to you guys and hopefully, getting some feedback on our scope. We'd like to underscore the importance of public-private partnerships, basically meaning, for data center providers, what kind of cooperation can they get from local governments, from the state, from the federal level to help them during an emergency? The things that maybe you don't plan for. And we're already looking at things like coordinating credentialing to get through roadblocks during, some kind of disaster. But also assess resilience and vulnerabilities of the lifeline infrastructure supporting data center operations. Primarily, right now we're looking at power, water, and transportation. We also want to model the downstream effects on lifeline sectors for when an outage occurs. Primarily, do power and water providers depend on services in the Ashburn area? Do hospitals, do federal government agencies rely on data housed in Ashburn data centers that, maybe don't have a backup? And then, we'd also like to evaluate state and county prioritization plans, model consequences as much as we can of what happens, both to singly homed content, but also downstream to the internet at large if there's an outage here. And then, we also want to look at long-term, how can we improve the resilience of the internet through a study like this? How can we get you guys who are, maybe data center providers, maybe transit providers, maybe cloud providers, get you all to the same table to put aside, the competition for a moment and talk about, maybe things like IXP planning, talk about things like, building for internet resilience in a community. So this little graph here is by Renesas, which is now a part of Dyne. They did some interesting trace routes during the Hurricane Sandy outages, basically just tracking what happened when New York and New Jersey went offline. So you see when we switch from blue to green there is where most of the traffic that was going through New York and New Jersey gets rerouted to Ashburn. So one of our hypotheses in this study is sort of from a larger doomsday perspective is if the same thing were to happen to Ashburn that happened to New York and New Jersey during the Hurricane Sandy time period, that that same traffic routed back through New York and New Jersey, the load that normally goes through Ashburn, would start to strain routers and connections in the New York and New Jersey area. So what we're interested in trying to figure out is at what point would that load become so great that critical services start to fail, or that internet traffic slowdowns, start to impact services, running over them, particularly things like voice over IP, emergency services, et cetera. And, looking at even a worst case scenario, what would have happened if Hurricane Sandy hadn't made the turn that it did, and if it happened to knock out New York, New Jersey, and the Ashburn area at the same time. So we're trying to make this valuable to all the stakeholders. And one of the reasons that we're here at NANOG, and that I really fought to make sure that we have a presence here and we engage this community's interest, is that we want to make sure that this is relevant to private industry. Traditionally, government has been really terrible at being behind the curve on this kind of stuff. And government comes in late and makes regulations that don't make any sense, that aren't informed based on what industry is doing. So we have a really good opportunity here to try and get ahead of the curve. The RRAP program in the past has been very, focused on traditional critical infrastructure, as I said, but also sort of playing whack-a-mole with the most vulnerable pieces of our infrastructure. We'd like to change that so that we're not reacting to an emergency, but that we're, proactively trying to prevent one. So, again, I'm going to keep saying throughout my brief time here that I'm here to engage you guys and try to get feedback, even if that's, just based on your intuition. And we're looking for anything like data sources, data collection avenues, tools that may exist in the industry. We're working on developing some modeling tools to model outages, to be able to say, if Ashburn disappears, where does the majority of that traffic go? Right now we have some ideas on how to collect that data, including, more traditional ideas, but also utilizing curated data sets like the telegeography data set. But we also don't want to try and replicate things that are already happening in the private industry, because at least my opinion is that you guys will do it better than we will. So anything that you're able to share with us, we're very interested to hear it. So, how do we model a regional outage? During a slowdown, at what point, in the congestion control process do things like VoIP become unusable and impact emergency services? What scale of outage or disaster would be serious enough to hamper or to defeat TCP's resilience? So as I said, we're looking at traditional data collection avenues, things like sustained trace routes. Previous studies, we're getting a lot of fiber maps from local providers, but we also have a lot of local data center providers involved in interview processes and facilitated discussions. Some of your companies are already representative. We have folks from Raging Wire and folks from, well, I don't even know the list of companies, but we're also looking at Iowa State has an internet modeling platform called Ice Age that we hope to utilize. And like I said, telegeography and other curated data sets. So I would like to open up the floor for any sort of questions, comments, thoughts, but also I want to emphasize that I'm going to be sitting up here in front for the rest of the day until I have to go catch my flight. If anyone wants to exchange contact information or chat more about this idea, I would love to get any kind of feedback, and primarily keeping in mind that studies like this tend to, if they go well, be applied, across the board. So maybe we do Ashburn this time, and maybe we evaluate another region the next time. If we find out that there's a lot of good data to be gotten here, I think that this could be a real benefit to your community, but also to sort of, I hate to say it this way, but bringing the Department of Homeland Security and the federal government into the 21st century and really trying to get ahead of these resilience problems and not always be reacting to disasters, but again, preparing for them. So if anyone has any questions, comments, I would love to hear them. I thank you all for your time, and yeah.
Thank you, Michael. If you, are there any questions from the room? So thanks again.